Hi all and welcome to the second hour. That was Space Odyssey and the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm sure you're all excited, I know I am. And time to hear the voice again. Taff?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm fine, how are you? Let me just
I'm having a giggle over your song choice there at the end.
I thought you might like that one. Nice and dramatic. It's been a long time coming, and
it has been a while.
So, what have you been up to in the last 9 months? Well, we've been carrying on with the groundwork as such.
Well, I've been doing a lot of work of my own, as you should know, Tommy, because you've been a participant in it.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, just to let everyone know, just because I haven't been talking doesn't mean I've been idle.
No.
Both myself and the Silver Legion continue to work. We just don't have anything that we could show you to go and actually look at in the physical world yet, which is part of the reason why I decided to step back in the first place. I felt like I should put my money where my mouth is, and that's not yet possible. However, Tommy has begged, pleaded, and wheedled for me to come on and do a discussion, especially about some specific topics that I think are germane to the experience of everybody in the Cosmic Voice. As some of you are aware, there are a lot of energetic and psionic attacks being leveled at the Cosmic Voice participant base, and that's one of the things that I'd like to talk about here today. But I'll let Tommy structure the conversation here.
Right. A couple of questions we get asked is why no Sunfire with us at this time?
Well,
Can you address
the situation with Sunfire is pretty complex. We'll put it this way. We still consider Sunfire very much a friend and very much an ally. Unfortunately, there were interpersonal matters that interfered with this. At this point of time, I think Sunfire needs to focus on healing herself and figuring out her own self before we're really willing to open to having her on the show as a full participant. Once again, I'm not saying that Sunfire's been taken over. I'm not saying that she's co-opted or anything like that. She has some healing that she's got to do personally, and until that happens, I'm not willing to go on a show with her.
That's fair enough. Right. Where are we next? Are you able to give any updates on anything else before we get into the business side of it?
Not a whole lot, other than we have, like I said, been very, very busy. I've been juggling this work and a full-time job. That contract's up, and then immediately after they asked me if I wanted to go again. So, back at it, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, we have been extremely busy on the non-physical side. We continue to attempt to secure the space around Earth to make sure that there's no invasions. Anything that's getting through is basically using back doors to get to the surface. And the thing about those is that back doors don't really permit full invasion scale movements. They're kind of limited in their flow. So that's a good thing. Unfortunately, we don't also have the ability to use those back doors, so that's a bad thing. We do have some operations in the works that we're hoping will yield some useful fruit, but you know, oftentimes when we do this, it ends up being back to the drawing board as usual. So I have definitely not been sitting on my butt doing nothing. We've all been working behind the scenes. Unfortunately, due to operational constraints, I can't discuss details and specifics of what we've been doing, but we are attempting to take down the Matrix, and we are attempting to basically take down the prison that's been put up. Now, what you got to realize when we're talking about this is that there was a seriously monumental effort made into ensuring we could never, ever land and never, ever interact, and ensuring that any kind of positive effort would fail. Fortunately, all of that hinged on us not knowing what the actual source was of the underlying problem. We've discovered that since, and that does make it a lot easier to begin the very arduous, long process of taking down all this crud.
Yeah. Good. Right, you mentioned earlier about the psionic attacks and the psychic attacks. A lot of members are reporting. I'd like you to go through the grounding and shielding and perhaps explain what's actually happening with those attacks and who's carrying them out, if you must.
So there's a lot of different ways in which attacks can be made on listeners. When you're listening usually through something connected to an electrical source. Usually it has to be turned on and receiving a transmission. Other things can be piggybacked along with that transmission. Everything in the universe is energy. I think we've probably established that fairly frequently, that it's no longer news to anyone. A lot of times things like electromagnetic frequencies, or ELF, are being used to propagate attack frequencies. People talk about Gwen towers and things like that. Yes, those things are being used against you. Additionally, there are kind of what I guess you could call Fisher attacks, in which there will be a little bit of energy put out to see what it comes into contact, and if it comes into contact with the right kind of fish, so to speak, you guys, then it will hook and attempt to use that hook as a conduit through which to attack you. Sometimes Fisher attacks are targeted at specific types of individuals or even specific individuals. Oftentimes you might have a person who is a carrier of the fishing line, so to speak, who has no involvement with it themselves, who is not aware of it themselves, but you come into contact with their energy and you're hooked.
Yeah, like a conduit.
That's another way. Yeah, they're a conduit essentially, and we've heard reports of specific individuals, and I'm not going to name names because these people are not to blame. No. And everybody thinks, the insidiousness of a conduit or a Fisher attack is that everybody automatically goes to the supposed apparent source, and that person is not responsible and usually not knowledgeable, and if they knew, would not want to be any part of that attack in the first place. So be careful when you're trying to pinpoint source, because there is a lot of shell game going on here, even energetically speaking. The nature of the enemy that we're opposing here is such that they like to use tools, who then use other tools, who then use other tools, and so on and so on and so on, so that it becomes an extremely monumental effort just to identify who is actually responsible. And a lot of those tools aren't even are tricked into doing it, and not even aware at all that they're being used. So it's a very tricky issue. Now the next part is how to defend against this kind of stuff. Things like ELF, things that are propagated through the electrical lines, that are propagated through towers, etc., you don't need to think of these things as being things that you cannot combat, because you can. There are physical methods that you can use to help ward them off. There are devices that some people have made that may or may not be effective, things like orgonite. I haven't been able to test or see anything about the effectiveness of things, but I've heard of stuff like Blue Shield and other technology of similar means that may help with combating some of these technologically propagated attacks. Additionally, you can, through the power of your own mind, block off these technologically powered attacks. You don't need to think of something that uses the physical world to propagate as something that you can't fight non-physically. You can. One of the best ways to do this is simply by being aware it's going on, and then deliberately and intentionally setting up your energy field so that it does not affect you. Now, there's several ways that you can deal with an attack. You can meet it head on and attack back. You can dissipate it, or you can deflect it. You can do this either passively or actively. There's benefits to both. An actively directed defensive technique relies you to be conscious, aware that you're being attacked, and able to direct your defenses consciously. A passively directed defense, on the other hand, is one that's set in place, and once set in place continues to work. You may have to check it from time to time. You may have to tweak it and do additional work, but once it's there regardless of whether you're awake or asleep, regardless of whether you're having a bad day, regardless of whether you have a migraine and can concentrate, or whatever. So I generally prefer passive defenses because they take a lot less energy and attention to keep going. But if you don't check them regularly and keep updating them, they can be co-opted, overwhelmed, or destroyed. Now, the big thing about this kind of thing is it all goes down to the power of your mind and the power of your imagination. If you're convinced that it won't work, if you're convinced that it's not real, it won't work and it won't be real for you. But if you decide to forego all that self-talk that speaks of doubt, speaks of I need to see proof before I believe it, you can defend yourself. You can basically fake it till you make it, so to speak, when it comes to energy work. So I've talked about grounding and centering before, and I'm going to give people a refresher. Now, once again, I'd like everybody to understand if you don't feel comfortable with a specific technique, don't use it. Doesn't matter if it's a meditation technique, doesn't matter who gave it to you. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, if it gives you the heebie-jeebies or a feeling of I don't really feel this is for me, don't do it. You have the capacity to invent your own techniques and do what you feel is right. I find that a lot of people, though, need a starting point from which to actually begin. Sort of like, how do I swim? Well, first you got to learn how to float, right? There's several different ways you can swim once you've learned how to float, but first you got to learn how to float. From there you can innovate. So the basic notion behind energy work is, of course, that everything in the universe is energy and that you are made up of this energy and also that you can consciously use this energy and tell it what to do. There's energy that's locked up into things and into places that is not so easy to use, but there's plenty of free energy, and I'm not talking about the kind that generates your electricity without a bill. I'm talking about ambient energy that's just floating around there waiting to be used. So, back to grounding and centering. In order to center, this is where you become fully within yourself. You draw in all parts of yourself that are flying off and busy, and this happens to all of us. We get distracted. Our energy goes everywhere. We aren't always very focused. Centering is the process of bringing yourself within yourself and delineating the boundary between yourself and that which is not yourself, including energy that isn't you. One way that I do this is I do a pane of glass visualization where I visualize all my stray bits as being silhouettes of myself doing various things, all of which have a little dot on their solar plexus. And I pull in those silhouettes until the dots on the solar plexus all line up. And it feels like a little click, and I'm centered. And centering is actually a really great way to regain some emotional composure. If you're like me and prone to, crying jags when you're extremely frustrated or angry and you want to, deal with that coworker who's really nasty or whatever, that center yourself, it will help. Grounding. Now, some people don't like grounding because it is one way to tie yourself to Mother Earth. This can be a leash, but this can also be a mutual gift. Tying yourself to Mother Earth doesn't mean that she's not going to let you go when you need to go, but some people don't like to do this. For those who do, once you are centered, and for a novice and even for experts, you shouldn't attempt to do energy work until you've centered, because then you're off balance. It's for those of you who have martial arts training, it's similar to understanding whether or not your core is in proper position. If your core is not aligned, somebody can give you a little shove and you'll end up on your nose. If your core is aligned, they can push you and you will stand like a rock. That is the principle of centering as well. And for the same reasons. And if you are uncentered and you attempt to do energy work, somebody can come along, give you a little shove, and you'll end up on your face. If you are centered, it is a lot harder to move you or use energy against you. So once you're centered, you want to connect with Mother Earth and make a two-way energy conduit so that if you are hit with more energy than you can handle, it goes to Mother Earth and strengthens her. And if something attempts to take energy from you, Mother Earth gives to you. It's a two-way, mutually beneficial relationship. You can ground from wherever you are, even when you're 30,000 feet above the ground in an airplane, or if you're standing on a concrete floor of your apartment, or sitting on your butt in the grass somewhere out in nature. Doesn't matter where you are, whether you're lying, standing, or on your head. You can ground, because we are all living things living on Mother Earth at the same frequency she is. We can ground from wherever we are. I like to visualize a tree root coming down from my feet or my butt or the middle of my back or whatever my position is, wherever is centered, and just going straight down to the core of the earth and forming that two-way relationship, kind of like a handshake. And then I'm like a tree rooted in Mother Earth. And she likes this. She likes this when her people ground, because it's an acknowledgement that we are hers and she is ours, and it's also very polite to do, because it shows that you consciously acknowledge Mother Earth. So once you've got your ground in your center, you can begin to construct your shields. This is largely an effort of visualization and imagination. If you're like me and you have a hard time visualizing because your visual center is kind of shot, you can decide simply through pure intent or through your pure imagination what you want things to do and how you want to do it. It's a bit like setting up if-then relationships. So if A, then B happens. What I like to do is set up, tell the energy around me, and I just basically imagine all this energy around me to do what I want it to do. And it does. It's that easy. So for instance, if I'm securing my house, I'll think of the walls, and I think of those walls being coated with energy, and that energy weaving itself into a fractal of infinite size and infinite tininess that captures anything that tries to come and harm anything in my household. So anything, whether it's a being, whether it's a frequency, whether it's an energy beam, anything gets trapped in that weave and becomes part of that weave and gets assimilated into that fractal and strengthens it so that the next thing that comes just gets integrated into it even more. So that's one form of shield. Other forms of shields might be to envision something like a metal shell around your house. These are proximity shields. You can put them in one place, and they'll stay. They won't move around with you. Then what I do is, once I've got my shields imagined, is I imagine it tied in to whatever the main source of life energy is in my vicinity. Now, I live in southern Alberta, and I'm close to the Bow River. Natural rivers run along the same conduits as many, many huge rivers of energy. Just as water flows into watersheds and into rivers and basins, life energy also flows down the same sort of ideas, down the same paths. Wherever you have a river or a stream, you will have what's called a ley line. There's also the geometric ley lines, but I suggest to people to use the natural ley lines because they are Mother Earth's gift to us. They're also much harder to co-opt. whereas the geometric grid lines that have been put up as ley lines can be more easily used against you. Tie into the natural or tie into other sources if you have them, and you're usually good to go. So once you've got your shield, you imagine a little thread going out from it, finding the nearest source of natural energy and tying into it. Make a little knot in your mind, and there you go. It'll stay attached. It'll draw what it needs when you're not there. It doesn't need you to consciously maintain it and keep it there. You can also do this around your own body, where you can make a shell that keeps everything away, that's form-fitting or even pushed out a little bit to protect your aura, and does not let anything harmful past. This you'd pretty much have to power from yourself, because you're running around all day and you're not necessarily able to tie it into a node line. The key is to make it so that it doesn't need your conscious maintenance to stay intact. Again, you're probably going to want to use shields that, instead of pushing back on an enemy, instead takes the force of the enemy and uses it against them. It's a very Tai Chi principle for those who are familiar with Tai Chi, is using force against itself. So instead of simply resisting, it would instead transmute. So if you envision the bad energy coming at you as red, when it hits your shield, it turns blue, or whatever colors you feel are more appropriate, and it becomes part of the shield, and it strengthens the whole without harming you. These are extremely effective shields, if only because they can't be overloaded. Some of our ships use the same shielding mechanisms, where the more you shoot at it, the harder it gets and the stronger it gets, and the harder it is to actually damage the shield. You'll also want to make a shunt to the ground, so that if the shield gets overloaded past its capacity, it doesn't hit you, it goes into Earth, where it can't hurt her and where she can do whatever she wants with it. If you are battle-minded, not everybody is. Not everybody wants to fight back. Some people just want to be left alone, and that's fine. But if you are battle-minded, you can fight back. One way to do that is to try to figure out what the source of the attack is, and then send a lobby of your own flinging over to deal with it. You want to be really careful on your targets of this, because you can end up hitting a patsy who all of a sudden now has a reason to actually go after you. If you've got a conduit, then, well, you're basically punishing the innocent. So be careful on things like this. You want to be sure of your target before you shoot. And don't, just like with a real gun, don't aim at anyone you don't intend to actually shoot or aren't comfortable actually shooting. So, target verification, if you're going to do this, I hope you're able to verify a target, because it's not a good idea to just go shooting off into the dark.
Nope.
For those people who are sitting here thinking, yeah, blah, 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 psychic attacks, yeah, whatever. Whether you believe in it or not, it does happen. And for those for whom it's a factor, it is a major, major factor. People's lives can be ruined by this. So if you're a person for whom this is real, this advice can help you. And if you're a person for whom this hasn't ever been a factor, be on your merry way. Keep it in mind, because someday you might need it.
Yes. Well, I can verify that, Tath, because I've had numbers of people who have come to me with these type of issues, and I mean numbers.
And the thing about
it is real.
Is the more you do it, the more you become aware of the fact that energy is real, and the more acute your senses are to things that go on around you and change. So once you start to realize, oh, well, that's my aura. Oh, something just touched it. Oh, I can perceive things moving in the energy around me. The more you do it, the more adept you get at that, the more acute your senses are. The more you practice, the more you realize this is real, and that you do need to take this stuff into account, and you do need to take action.
Yes. Yeah, it's lots of people are frightened to come forward because they think, society tells
fear
them
of ridicule is a huge barrier to a lot of people.
And we've managed on Cosmic Voice to get people to come forward, because the more they come forward, it gives more courage to other people to not hide in the dark with this, because it is real and it's happening to far too many people. We had issues with the chat room recently, and a number of others who have experienced it. I've experienced it myself. If you once you get up to scratch on it as such, you can counteract it within seconds. But as Tath says, you have to believe. It's only an energy thought process that's targeting you, and it's an energy thought process that fights it back. Are you pretty much
I've got
covered
a little
on
more to say about that.
Yeah,
sometimes if you're a person who's been under attack for a long, long time, or particularly vicious attacks, because some people on this planet get what I call the quote-unquote special treatment, where the things that are fiction to most of us are very, very horrifyingly real.
Yeah.
If you're a person like that, sometimes you do have to ask others for help. Sometimes it isn't easy or even possible to do the work all on your own. In times like that, sometimes there are people out there who can help you. The thing is, though, that this is an energy expenditure for them. And when I say it's an energy expenditure, I'm not kidding around. I've seen people knocked on their butts by the kind of energy that gets flung around in these kinds of clearing sessions.
Yes.
One person I've worked with and who I can recommend is a man by the name of Anthony King. And I'll give you his website, and I'll also post this on my own site after the show. It is HTTP://SEEREN.me. So it should sound like Seer and Me. He does take donations, and in this case I would say it is warranted, because this is a service and it is actual work. This is not something that he can do without feeding himself, without having a place to live. He has to have access to food, shelter, and all of those things that we need to survive in order to keep doing this work. It's not something that, it's not like an e-copy of a book where they have potentially unlimited copies of them at no cost to themselves, and then they're charging you money. No, he's charging money for an actual service, and it is a real service and real work. If you do choose to go to Anthony Kane or any other worker of this variety, I'm most familiar with him because, like I said, I've worked with him directly, and I can vouch for his integrity, and I can vouch for the fact that he is really what he says he is. Please don't think that it's appropriate to ask for stuff for free, because these guys, people like this, are spending a lot of effort to try to help other people, and they have a right to live in order to keep doing so. If you are having serious financial issues, you can always talk to him. He may be able to cut a rate, because, like I said, it's donation-based. So there's people like that who can help you out if you're really in a hard way and need extra help from another actual person.
Yes. I can vouch for the members. I can vouch for Anthony as well. He does very good work. So, right, are you pretty much covered on that now, Tath?
Yep.
Next thing I would like you to talk about is the Fractal Virus, the origin of evil.
Yeah, the Fractal Virus.
And the
Captain
nature of source.
XCS and Chloe have discussed a little bit on the Facebook about the fractal virus and the nature of universes. Captain XCS, by the way, is one of the Silver Legion's mages here, incarnated on Earth. She's a very special person to me. I work with her. I work with her closely every day. We're in contact pretty much. She's probably best known on CV for the Kundalini Reiki meditations that she writes. Once again, I'm going to tell people, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you don't have to. You can still contribute without doing Kundalini Reiki. That's what she's most comfortable with. That's what she knows. That's where a lot of her expertise lies. So that's what she uses. Other people, you can join in your own intent, in your own fashion, any way you want. You're not restricted to using one form of meditation alone. Again, we provide it because it provides a useful basis, a useful starting point for people who may not have advanced to the point where they're willing to invent stuff out of whole cloth on their own. So, the fractal virus, the origin of evil, and the nature of source. The fractal virus, actually maybe we should backstep a bit and talk about the nature of source and the nature of universes. Source is the universe and everything within it. Source is you, source is me, source is the couch, source is the plant I'm looking at, source is the TV, source is the light that's shining, source is the sun, source is the stuff that we call dark matter. Source is everything in aggregate. And because source is defined as everything in aggregate, source can't take one little bit of creation and say, this is me. Because everything is source in aggregate. There are no beings that are set aside as special speakers for source, that are set aside as source incarnate, because the very definition of an aggregate is that once you have something that is singular, it is no longer aggregate. Once you have that being, it either ceases to be source entirely, because it's one more specific thing within the aggregate. It is not the entirety of the aggregate. Or source ceases to be source, which generally involves the destruction of everything in the universe, and that's not a good thing. So, source is this universe and everything in it. Even visitors become partially of source while they are in this universe. This universe is attached to other universes, which go higher in dimensionality. We're here, as we know it, from 1 to about 12 or 13 as it's being born. As we attach to greater parts of the multiverse, to other parts of the multiverse, those older branches or twigs are maybe going from 12 to 44 or 12 to 36 or whatever, and so on and so on. So many zones of dimensionality are captured in each extension of the twig, and it is very much like a twig. We're a leaf at the end of a twig that is on a twig, that is on a branch, that is on a big branch, that, and so on and so on and so on, until our multiverse branch connects to the main trunk of existence. And there are an infinite number of branches, there are an infinite number of twigs, there are an infinite number of leaves, and even our leaf can go on to become a twig and make other leaves and flowers and so on. Sometimes we refer to this as the universe tree, and it's a very apt metaphor because if you were to look at the structure, it is tree-like. It is also flower-like. And our universe actually looks more like a lotus than a leaf, but we can refer to it as a leaf for simplicity's sake. When our universe was born, and this is a young universe, you know, it seems pretty darn old to us, but It's actually one of the newer flowers on the twigs at the end of the branch. When our universe was born, it was born with a disease. The disease came higher up the trunk or higher up the branch, not quite to the main trunk. It isn't infecting the entire tree, but much of the branch we're on is infected with this disease. That disease we refer to as the Fractal Virus. What happened was a group basically broke off from the main universe tree and discovered that they could destroy universes and kill the sources within them and use the leftover dead universe material, because even if you kill a source and that universe consciousness is dead, there remains living beings inside of it, although they will be in decline at that point and eventually will go extinct because the source flame within them is also dead. There will be living beings inside of it that can become enslaved. There will be raw materials in the form of all the matter and higher dimensional matter that you see around us, and there will be energy still left over in the corpse. Just like when you die, you leave a body behind, and that body can go on to become dirt or ash or worm food or whatever. And this group basically learned how to kill universes, in other words, kill sources, in order to take and cannibalize those corpses and to construct their own artificial dead universe that is not connected to the tree. Now, the problem with this is that it's a dead universe. That means it can't innovate, it can't create, it can't expand and grow, because this universe, as any physicist will tell you, is expanding. What they don't realize is that there is not indeed a finite amount of material, because this universe is alive, our source is alive, and as long as our source remains alive, new material will be generated. There will be no heat death of the universe. However, if our source dies, that's when you get the heat death of the universe. And that's when this group that developed the Fractal Virus comes in and basically cannibalizes everything in sight, enslaves anyone left alive, and uses all the raw materials to keep their own dead universe's false life going that much longer. Everything they do costs them materials and energy. Everything they do costs them lives. So for them, this is a zero-sum game. For us, as long as our universes are alive, we have infinite resources. However, Drake has in the past discussed the notion of infinities of different sizes. The dead universe of the attackers is a heck of a lot larger than our little leaf. So even though we technically have an infinite space, so do they. And they have a larger infinity than our leaf, though not of our branch or the whole tree. To go back to what I was saying before, they infected the branch with a disease that was designed to create ideal circumstances for one-shot kills on universes once they reached what they consider to be a harvestable size. Everybody wonders what's so important about this planet. Why is the big deal about this planet? You know, what's going on here? Why is Earth so important? Earth is the kill shot. If we fail here, this universe dies. That's why everyone and their dog is getting involved. That's why there's all these different groups that are trying to manipulate things here. Some of them are working for the universe killers because they've been promised a little slice that they can rule over. They've been promised their own kingdom, their own slaves, their own little thing, whatever. Some of them don't realize that what they're doing is going to result in the end of the universe if they're actually successful. Even the ones who know what they're doing, what they don't realize is that these universe killers, because it is a zero-sum game for them, never let their minions actually gain their rewards. This is a very important thing. If you're helping these guys, if you're working against the good of this planet and the survival of this planet, you're not going to be a king in hell. You're going to be food. you're not going to get whatever it is you think you're getting. A couple of people from this universe, and they won't be from Earth, they won't be on Earth, let me guarantee that. A couple of people from this universe will be given the Oprah treatment to be able to use as examples to the minions in other universes. Hey, look, you'll become a king. Guess what? The rest of you are food, because sharing with you cuts on the whole that these killers are trying to get. And everything they have to share with someone else is one thing that they don't get themselves. They put so much effort into making these diseased universes one-shot kills. What makes you think they'll ever share any of that bounty with anyone that isn't themselves? They don't. Nobody on this planet, nobody in this galaxy, nobody in this galaxy supercluster is going to get to reap those rewards. The ones who are actually doing this come from outside this universe, and none of those rewards are going to go to anyone within this universe. So if you're listening, now might be a time to turn and start fighting for your own survival. You're not going to be a king in hell. Maybe it is better to just be a regular dude in heaven than a king in hell, because you'll never be that. The origin of evil. I've had people ask me, if Source is everything in the universe and Source is so good, then why does Source tolerate evil? The bare truth of the matter is that the evil is the result of the disease. The disease creates a kind of sociopathy, a kind of psychopathy in which people's self-interest becomes self-destructive. It looks like self-interest in the short term, but it actually turns very self-destructive in the long term, because in aggregate it leads to the death of the entire universe. In a normal, healthy universe, you will have some service to others, you will have some service to self. Actually, you'll have mostly service to others. You'll have some service to self, and they will be nicely self-contained. They will be happy enough to keep their atrocities in one little spot, because before any of them can rise up and cause problems for the neighbors, somebody else stabs them in the back down there and takes their spot. It's a self-limiting thing. That gives those who really want to experience that kind of life the option to experience it without endangering those who do not want to experience that kind of life. It's contained. In this universe, however, it's like somebody threw some yeast in and then let it go. Instead of being self-contained, it grew over its boundaries and started infecting everything else in sight. That is the result of the disease. We call it a fractal disease because it changed how the base fractal of this universe twisted when it was born. Not much. You don't need much of a change to cause a big problem in a fractal. That's why we have evil, and if we succeed here, we can and will eliminate it so that those who wish to live in peace can live in peace, and those who wish to live in the little microcosm of tyranny will have their little bubble of horrible safely out of the way where it doesn't touch anyone else. So the other thing about Source and universes is that sources cannot act directly upon themselves, any more than you can sit here and out of the power of your own mind tell your heart cells to grow, or your kidney to grow, or tell your fat cells to fuck off. Source cannot control and micromanage any of its parts. Instead, what it does is, through synchronicity, it informs those parts of things going on that it needs addressed. For instance, if there's something threatening Source's life, as there is now, Source will make that information available so that the people who can counter it can get into position to counter it. If there's something that Source needs done for the health of its own self, it will let actors within itself know. The people who are capable of fixing the problem will learn of the issue, and then they can choose or choose not to lend a hand. If they choose not to, it'll be offered to the next guy. And if the next guy chooses it, then they'll go in. And if they need support, more people will be brought in. That's how the Silver Legion ended up here. We learned about the problem synchronistically, and we decided to come help. So anyone who's expecting Source to just wave a magic wand and fix everything, that's not how it works. Everything that happens in the universe is done by people. It is done by actors. It is done by beings who can make a decision and take an action to achieve a result. There are no gods that sit there and just wave a hand and miracles happen. That's not how existence works. Anything promising you that is coming from the side of the universe killers who have set up a really, really nasty alternative to Source, a decoy, if you will, that we call the demiurge. And this is your hierarchy. This is your one true God. This is anything that demands you obey. This is anything that puts itself over you. Opt out of it because it is not of Source. It is not of life. It is trying to lure you into its dead universe and eat you.
Yes.
I see we're almost about to have the hour.
Taff, can you touch on the fact about light and dark, please?
Well, light and darkness are often used as shorthand for good and evil. They are not. Both light and darkness. And when I say light and darkness, I'm talking about, the stuff that comes out of the sun or the stuff that comes out of your light bulb. That's light. Or darkness, what happens when you turn off the light and there's no light there? It's dark. As physical constructs, as the underpinnings of existence, light and darkness are both required in order for existence to function the way it's supposed to be. If you have nothing but light, nothing is differentiated. If you have nothing but darkness, nothing is differentiated. The point of existence is to be differentiated, to be one thing different in a sea of everything different. What we're trying to do in existing is see how many different combinations of everything we can create that are different. That is what experience is. To experience and learn and become part of all of that. In a very remote sense, yes, we are all one because, we're all part of Source and Source is everything. But the point of existence is to be an individual, to be an experiencing being that is different from its surroundings and able to perceive the difference because that is where the beauty of existence and the fun of existence is. Between light and darkness intersecting, you get a lot of different possibilities. Many different colors, many different forms, lots of different forms of existence. Those two things on their own are not good or evil. They're simply fundamental underpinnings of existence. Part of the problem of the Fractal Virus is what it did is it infected the fundamental construct or the fundamental existence of darkness and basically made it crazy. So that all of a sudden, instead of, basically being a partner with light in producing existence, it tried to take over light and rub it out in order to conquer everything. And that's part of why we have this notion that dark is so bad and evil. The underlying dark existence of this universe has been cleaned. The base part of it has been cleaned. It does take what we experience as time for that to filter down the fractal because, of course, as I've mentioned before, these things are a result of actions and keep on cascading down until they reach us or reach a particular point. When people talk about the forces of light and the forces of darkness, typically what they're trying to talk about is basically those that preserve life and those that destroy. I think it's time we got away from that terminology because many of these things that pass themselves off as light, that produce shiny brightness, are not necessarily fighters for life. And even some of these things that absorb light and produce absorbing darkness are not necessarily evil enemies. For instance, Admiral Mander, he's from another universe. He's not a native. And in his universe, light and darkness are co-creators in balance and harmony, and they are not associated with good or evil. And he is the child of the dark, the primeval darkness in his universe. And he is an extremely good and honorable being. Anybody who encounters him, provided they're not bad guys, generally discovers that really darn quick. You know, he's a person of integrity, and he's a person of goodness, and he's a person who is devoutly committed to protecting life.
Yes.
A lot of these beings that declare themselves to be of the light are actually working for the Demiurge, the false source that has been set up to help conquer this universe. One of the biggest telling signs of this is anytime they start referring to hierarchies. Oftentimes they'll refer to the kingdoms of heaven or the hierarchy of heaven. Ultimately, what they want you to do is stop thinking for yourself and start obeying. Anytime you see that paradigm, anytime you see that construct, that setup, turn around and run, because these beings mean you no good. There is no hierarchy. As far as Source is concerned, you know, the greatest of the gods in terms of power and strength is just as valuable as the poorest human here on Earth, or even a rock or a mountain or a pile of dirt or some ocean water. We're all equal in Source. There is no, there are maybe beings who are capable of achieving more in terms of certain forms of action than others, but that doesn't make them better. It doesn't give them an opportunity or a right to rule over others, and it sure does not mean that you have to worship them or do what they say unless you feel that that's what you want to do.
Right, we're at the top of the hour. That was fantastic. Thanks for that, Tath. You'll stay with us for the final hour?
Yeah, sure. I think we have a few more things to mention. So
good. Right, we'll be back after a couple of songs with the final hour with Drake and Tanaath. And here we go, one of Tath's favourites. Hi all, and welcome back to Cosmic Voice in the final hour this evening with Drake and our special guest, the one we've been waiting for a long time, Tanaath. Hi Tath, are you ready?
I'm here.
Drake, are you here?
Yeah, I'm playing that role I started out with called Mountain Mouse, you know, quiet and listening. Then again, you got to understand something, folks. Trying to get a word in edgewise when a lady's got the microphone sometimes is an impossible situation. So I just let her fly, and, you know, leave it alone. I'd hate to antagonize anybody, you know.
I don't know, Drake. You know, I think I'm pretty focused and clear, and I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that I've been talking to people about, and I know you've noticed you mentioned one of the many, and some of the things that people are questioning to me as to relativity is to how to advance beyond the usual norm and whatnot. So I've got at least right now I got 3 people who are learning the decisiveness in terms of controlling the reality as we find that reality acceptable. Meaning that it don't matter what's going on or who's doing what to who. If you don't like it, you ain't got to put up with it. And a lot of people don't really understand exactly how that works, and they go, yeah, right. Well, the power of positive thinking covered the very, very outer edges of it. Now, I went ahead and stepped all the way into the twilight zone and took a bath in it. Now, what you're going to have to understand is that statement, you are exactly where you have decided to be, is a great part of everything. Now, some of the things that Tass dealt with in terms of attacks, in terms of this, in terms of that, also can fall under or within those categories. Some of the things that people are not aware of in terms of like protections and all that sort of thing, or getting what they really should have rather than what somebody decides to throw crumbs from their table at, it's all available. So I'll leave it alone at that.
Right, thanks for that, Drake. Tath, recently you did a blog covering the issue of the gods. Can you touch on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Now, most of us have heard of the gods. You know, you might have heard of the people like Apollo and Athena and Demeter and stuff like that, or Thor or Pele, or any of the various legendary figures that were acknowledged as gods by humanity on this planet. They exist. What gods are basically among the firstborn of the universe, and also among the universe's most powerful. Gods are able to move and act very, very powerfully. They're able to influence large portions of creation, and many were instrumental in actually creating creation, in taking the undifferentiated stuff, the proto-universe, and forming it into universe. Some of them have incarnated on this planet. Anyone whose name we acknowledge as a god on this planet has, interacted directly with humans on this planet, typically not as an incarnate, but as a god. It was due to changes made by the reptilians that our legends of the gods all include things such as worship, because the gods as they were born do not require worship, do not desire worship, and consider the need for worship to be a sign of insanity in a god. There are those who turned against Source and became addicted to the power of ruling others, and who actively seek worship. As I mentioned, they're considered to be insane. They're often working now directly for the demiurge. A lot of the times they've been promised their own kingdom in hell, so to speak, out of the dead scraps in the universe. And once again, even they will not get to reap what it is they think that they're going to win out of this proposition. Back to the incarnate thing. A number of gods have incarnated on this planet. Some of them may even be people who are listening to this radio show. Some may not have remembered who they are. Some have incarnated themselves into not just one incarnate, but multiple incarnates. Some of those are aware of the fact that there are multiple incarnates of the same being. Others are not. I'm not here to out any gods. I'm not here to tell you who they are or validate anybody when they come and say, oh, I'm so-and-so. But I will tell you that they are real, and some of them are incarnated here. They've been lured here through various means. Some cases they came when they were called for help. Some cases they were tricked here. Some cases they wanted to come help conquer on behalf of the bad guys. For one way or another, a number of gods were lured here as incarnates. Once they become incarnated, they're just like everyone else down here. They have just as many abilities on this ground as you or I or anyone else does, which means that even if you happen to know so-and-so is this god or another, they're still not going to be able to grant any wishes or make any miracles or do anything that you could not do. And that's why a lot of them keep quiet, because they know damn well they're not able to do these things that people want from them. And so they keep quiet about it, because they know if somebody knows, oh, well, you're this god, do something, God for me. No, we don't get that. Nobody gets that down on this ground. They get the same thing every other incarnate gets, and that is the shitty end of the stick in terms of being an outsider, in terms often of knowing who they are and what they're missing and not being able to do much about it. Some have maybe more or less psychic ability or metaphysical ability. But again, there's no wish-granting genies going on here. There's no miracles. How is this relevant? Well, a lot of these matrices and grids and things like that and portals take this energy of gods, often those who are incarnated, and uses their attachment to their own identity as a way of furthering that prison that keeps us all trapped here, keeps friendlies out, and keeps us coming back, reincarnating against our will. So, for instance, if you happen to be a goddess incarnate, and maybe you really, really identify with Aphrodite or Hathor or something like that, well, your attachment to your own identity strengthens that prison's hold on you, and in turn strengthens the entire prison's hold on everyone. This does not mean that you need to reject who you are. This does not mean that you need to say, oh, well, I'm not that person anymore, or I reject that person. What it means is you need to become aware of this tie on yourself, and you need to break it and resist it consciously. Many gods have many names, and one of the reasons why so many cultures may know the same god by many different names is to create more opportunities for attachment. For instance, the goddess known as Athena to the Greeks was known as Minerva to the Romans, was known as Neith to the Egyptians, had a male name in China, and may have had identities elsewhere. So if Athena were to incarnate down here, even if she didn't identify with the name Athena, if she identified with any of the other names that were put on her, if she woke up one day and realized, hey, I'm Neith, she'd be hooked. In that way, it turns the awakening of the individual against themselves. Now, there are ways to free yourself, as I said, if you're one of these individuals. And it's not limited to gods. Sometimes there's people on this planet who are angels who have names known to humanity. Sometimes there's people who are heroes or other figures of legend, and they wake up one day and they realize, oh, I'm Boudica. Or, hey, I was this legendary figure, or I was that legendary figure. Well, the moment you come into your identity, that's when you are hooked, and in turn, where that hook further strengthens the things. So if you know who you are, and you know that you're represented somewhere here in myth or legend, you're going to need to free yourself. Captain XCS did create a meditation that can act as a starting point for people who wish to free themselves from this matrix of the gods. I will also say a word of caution to anybody who's participating in things like goddess portals or Isis portals or things like that. While these sound like really wonderful things on the face of it, they often have the potential to further strengthen this prison and keep gods tied to this planet as slaves and as victims, and in turn keep people tied to this planet as slaves and as victims. So they aren't necessarily as wonderful as they're being presented, even if they sound very politically correct and very powerful.
Yep, I agree. Well, thanks for that. The next part I want to go on to is, you just touched on it, is all these beings of light and love and light and the love of all things Palladian. I'd like you to discuss.
As I've mentioned before, the Pleiades and Pleiadians, they are not one concrete group. It's not one species. There are hundreds of Pleiadian species. Some of them are extremely hostile. Some are neutral, and others want to help. When somebody says, I'm a Pleiadian, or I talk to Pleiadians, it is perfectly all right to ask which ones. If they are not able or are not willing to answer, then take it with a grain of salt, because there are Pleiadians out there who are using the term Pleiadians and everybody's association with good guys as Pleiadians to attempt to sneak past your bullshit filter. Now, I've heard of a lot of contactees who say they work with Pleiadians. What I try to do is encourage them to find out which ones they work with. The nature of their relationship with the extraterrestrials they work with is also important. If they're a subordinate, if they just passively take information, if they just get told stuff and then relay it, that's not a very healthy relationship. My personal relationship with my people is very much two-way, and I am a full participant. I don't just get stuff relayed to me. In fact, I don't really get messages much at all. Instead, the things I talk about are typically the things that I am a full participant in and that I have experienced firsthand, or that I've been involved in the discovery of. I'm not just relaying things that somebody has told me. I am relaying my actual experiences. When I interact with other members of the Silver Legion, the relationship is very equitable and personable. They don't just come and dictate stuff to me. We work together. We're friends. We know each other's names. We know each other's habits. We know each other's personalities. For instance, I happen to know that Admiral Mander really, really, really hates fish on account of almost getting eaten by a very, very large catfish. And really, really loves blueberries to the point of stealing them from my hand. Little things like that, seeing their personalities, understanding them as individuals and persons. If you see that kind of relationship of an incarnate with their contacts, it's a lot more healthy, and therefore more likely to be an actual positive relationship than somebody who's just, we choose you, Pikachu, talk for us, fight for us, die for us. That's not healthy. That's something straight out of the page of the Demiurge.
Yes. Very good. Yeah, there's too much focus on Palladians and everything works. It's become like the byword of the ET movement, if you like. And it's good that you've been able
that
to
was deliberate
apply
too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This piggybacking of the term Pleiadian on everything ET was very deliberate. It was set up as a Trojan horse so that when the time came, the bad guys could come in and say, Pleiadian. And everybody would go, oh, good guy. No, they're not. There are good Pleiadians. I happen to know that the Dakota of Tegeta are pretty decent people. And I also know that the Aarons, and that ERRAN, of Tegeta are also pretty decent. But in general, you probably want to avoid anyone from Sterope or Merope, anyone from Maya, and most of those from Alcyone or Alcyone, however you prefer to pronounce it, because they're serving their own interests.
Alcyone have a history, do they not, Tath?
They do. And one thing is, if they're here and they're genuinely helping, they at least owe it to us to tell us what part they played in causing the problem and not just present themselves as, oh, hey, look, we're helping you out of the goodness of our heart. No. If the Alcyones are helping, it's because they owe us after having screwed us.
Yeah.
And they need to be upfront and honest about the fact that they're paying for their sins and not just here out of the goodness of their heart.
Yes, I agree. Tath, when we were doing the shows last time, you mentioned the 3 times thing, the 3 times check for entities. Does that still apply?
As far as I know, yes. Also, I would say, if you're ever in doubt as to whether a being has your best interest in mind, or whether it intends harm, if you feel even just a little bit uneasy, get out of there. Don't stick around and find out the hard way. Even if somehow they've managed to bullshit their way past the 3 times test, if you don't feel comfortable, you're not obliged to accept or be interacted with. Get out, and if you feel really threatened, you can fight back.
I agree. Any updates on ascension or transition, I should say?
Well, whether or not we transition or ascend depends on whether or not we win this war. Now, the thing about this is it's been kind of a moving target. There are some sources that would have you believe that it's guaranteed. Well, if we experience it, we'll look back and say, oh yeah, it was guaranteed. The problem is that these sources are blinded to the alternative. They're only looking down and seeing one possibility. They're not seeing the other possibilities, which are real, and they aren't nice. Additionally, there are a number of measures being taken to prevent our ascension, because if we do ascend, then the beings that I've spoken of previously lose their one-shot kill. Doesn't mean they can't still kill a universe. It just means that they lose the one shot. Now, best case scenario, we take them out too, and then they do lose the ability to kill the universe or any others. And yes, ascension will be required for this. I'm not going to put a timeline on it. The circumstances have changed. Even those who purport to be from the future aren't necessarily from the future that our timeline is on. Every event that happens, every major incident that happens, changes what potential events can happen in the future. So if you come from the distant future and you went back to like 1970 or 1960 or whatever, what you knew at 1960 would have been the case. But as time moves forward and things happen that you don't expect, you move farther away from your own timeline. You're now on this one. And this one may not be anything like what you thought when you came from the future. Time travel's kind of funny that way. If you're a time traveler and you go back in time and you make a change, you can experience that change. And anything on that timeline going forward can experience that change. But the other timelines that existed before your insertion point still continue without feeling that that possibility. So this isn't the thing that we can solve by traveling through time and changing things. We're still on the timeline that we were on. And yes, this timeline that we are on has been tampered with. You know, certain sources speak about time wars. Well, these things have been going on. To the best of my knowledge, the time war has been stopped, and that kind of tampering is no longer possible, which is a good thing, because it means that there's no longer going to be a billion different time threads that we can be bumped into. Additionally, sources trying to tell you that it's a good thing to merge timelines into this one, no. We don't want that. That's really, really bad.
Yep.
Not only would it, drive us crazy trying to think logically about it, but it doesn't end up in anything good.
Right.
Now, going back to the matter of ascension, yes, ascension is a possibility still. We still have a chance of victory here. It's not a lost cause by any means. It's not a guaranteed win. It is a fight. We have to put the effort into it, but it is a possibility. As for the timing, we have no idea. The best information we had when we started put that window somewhere between 2012 and 2015. Since then, there's been a lot of stuff that happened, some of which may have impacted that. I have no idea. It could be tomorrow. It could be 2036, like some people are saying. All I got to say about that is I really hope it's before that, because 2036 is, like, honestly, as much time as we've had dealing with this shit, enough is enough.
Yeah. It certainly is. And talking about enough is enough, there's a question one of the members asked to Drake or Tanaath. Are we all going through some kind of a test right now? I feel as though I'm experiencing a battle within of good and bad, mixed emotions and being pulled in opposite directions. Like I want to rid my life of impurities and detox my system to make this pure. Is this normal, and what does it mean?
Yeah, that's normal. I don't know if I'd call it a test, because the constructs that are built up around this notion of testing an individual mostly come from the demiurge. However, are we being challenged, and are we growing from this? And are there situations arising that force us to sink or swim, grow or else? Yes. They're typically arising synchronistically. It's not a test. If you fail, it just means you take longer. Right, Drake?
Kind of, sort of, but I got a little bit different twist on it. A lot of people go for this idea of being tested. Well, you are being tested at all times from the time you're born until the time you die, as to whether or not you can get it right, basically. But outside of that, in terms of the time we're living in, a lot of people discount, and everybody loves this, biblical reference, but I'm going to make one. And what that is the period of time where we decide for ourselves, yay, nay, go or stay, and all that sort of thing. Pretty much a state or period of grace. Now, a lot of people don't understand what that word means. Grace is a smooth maneuver through difficult passage. It's how a mountain goat can run up a friggin' rock wall to the astoundment of the mountain lion that's chasing it. And if you can get a video of one, look closely, and you'll notice that the precision is called that of a hind's feet. The gait of a hind's feet is that one hoof goes where the other one just was. So when I say smooth maneuver through difficult passage, think about that mountain goat, and think about the hill we're climbing in terms of our ability to recognize even a small portion of what we can be. What we are would be nice, but what we can be is even better, and that we are striving for and towards a perfection that has never been made available to us before this time. We are a very special race of beings in that we are also creational beings. This is where the decision of the reality comes in. You decide, is that acceptable or no? You want to be this way? Would you like to be that way? And go from there. Take your dreams and experiment, man. You know, it's like a Frisbee. Flip flat, fly straight. Tilt, curves. Experiment.
Right, thanks for that, Drake. Question for Tanaath. I would like to know how to get in full contact with the people who I work with on higher dimensions.
Okay, this all goes down to, in part, what I was discussing about earlier about your ability to sense energy and your ability to perceive the world that isn't physically visible. As you develop those skills, you'll develop more and more acuity in understanding when other beings are physically or projecting down to where you are, even if you can't see them physically. You can learn how to feel them, you can learn how to recognize them, and you can even learn how to understand the energy that flows between you. Some people experience telepathy as a literal voice in their head. I'm telepathic, but I've never, ever had a voice in my head. Instead, what I get is I get almost like an entangling of the energy of the being that I'm speaking with. We tangle our energy, and the meaning comes through. And my mind will provide the vocabulary, and they will provide the meaning. And sometimes there'll be imagery, which is always astounding for me because I'm not very good at imagery on my own. And emotions. I often get their emotions very strongly. So if you sort of visualize it as, a handshake between you and the other individual with the information flowing down through your hands and into you, and you can understand it, that's kind of what it's like. And those of you who wish to get into contact with your family and with the beings that you may have been working with in the dream time, set the intention for them to project to you. It was amazing to us when the Silver Legion first started interacting with the extra dimensionals, is that a lot of them did not know how to project themselves as a spirit projection to the surface. They either knew how to use remote telepathy or how to, pick somebody up by soul and bring them to their ships to interact, but a lot of them hadn't figured out hey, you can actually extend a portion of your consciousness to stand right next to where that person is physically and talk with them. And so that's something that we've taught them. They've taught us how to build ships. We've taught them how to project. And, ask them to do that. Ask them to come down and project you into your presence and talk with them there. The nice thing about being projected to you is it's very hard to eavesdrop and it's very hard to interfere with that communication because it's so close and because it's like touching somebody on the hand and hearing their thought, or speaking to them telepathically. Nobody outside is going to be able to listen in. It's a very secure method of communicating.
Unlike channeling, would you like to touch on that, Taff?
Oh, channeling is, instead of you just hold their hand and talk with them, you pull them into your body and they start talking for you. Don't do that. Channeling is a form of possession. Now, there may be some channelers out there or channeled entities who, are reasonably decent people. But the fact of the matter is that channeling is a fundamentally damaging and fundamentally disempowering activity. And as such, anybody who's doing it is somebody who's willing to take part of an activity that they know may be harmful and that they know is unethical, and somebody who's willing to do that may not be the greatest person in the world to listen to. Now, there are people who use other forms of communication and call it channeling because everybody uses the term channeling and it's a vogue thing to do. You can ask individuals, what do they mean when they say they're channeling? How do they actually communicate? If they're letting someone just basically use them as a hand puppet for a little while, steer clear of them.
Yeah. You don't know who that being is that basically is possessing that body. They may sound like a certain person, but it can be replicated to sound like someone that you feel you can trust, and it's not really that person at all. That's what.
A lot of the times they're not even people. A lot of the times what they're channeling is like a pre-programmed artificial message.
AI, yeah.
It's not even a real individual.
Right. Question for Drake. One of the ground questions. Drake, lately we have seen 2 Rothschild deaths in the media. Do you think these are just lower level people being sacrificed, or are these people higher level seeking escape? What do you think, Drake?
They got caught the hard way in their own devices and eliminated. Some things ain't pretty, and if you think that's something, you wait until you see. As I stipulated the first hour of the show, I got 2 pages of notes on things, and if everything comes about as it's supposed to, we're gonna have a really fun 4th of July.
Another question for you, Drake. Are different parts of the Cabal now starting to bump each other off and fight amongst themselves?
Yeah, they've been at that for about a year. It's just now beginning to get to a point where people are beginning to notice. One of these days in the near future, somebody's going to tell Harry Reid to go do something to himself that's anatomically probably not possible, but they'll tell him anyway. And that's going to make major news. It's going to be a major person from what I get. There's things going on. Like I say, you're going to love it when it hits the fan. The oscillator's running. They're trying to figure out how to fit the big chunks in. Okay?
Another question for you, Drake. If marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug, which means it supposedly has no medical uses, why is medical marijuana legal in a bunch of states?
Because they proved that that's BS. There are about 20 or so different derivatives from marijuana that are absolutely beneficial. Now, you'll hear that smoking a joint will stop several different kinds of cancers and whatnot. Well, the problem with smoking a joint is you get stoned. Now, the derivatives can be put into a capsule, and you can take that sucker like you do your vitamin in the morning and be pretty much immune to just about anything. Now, depending on the specific, when combined with other derivatives of other so-called problems like drugs and whatnot, you can become pretty much physically immune to just about everything on this planet that would like to bite you and make you sick or whatever. So you might bear in mind that as we advance, and I'm talking about honest to God, true advancement, not the BS you hear, as we truly advance, we're going to be able to actually become basically healthy for a change. There's a bunch of changes need to go into this, but as I mentioned, there's 3 derivatives from 3 different places that, if used correctly, make you immune to just about anything. Meaning, as an example, one I know of that you take once about every 4 days, and you no longer get sunburnt. So you're going to have to do your homework and your studies, but you get the idea that, things are beginning to change. The ideology of using medical marijuana goes to a combination of pain relief and things of this nature. Extraordinary emotional incapacitations such as anxiety attacks and freaking out and that sort of thing are mellowed by the certain qualities of the THC, which is the active ingredient. When the THC is processed, it don't get you high no more, but you don't have the adverse effects of like paranoia attacks and things of this nature either. So basically, you get all of it when you smoke a joint, mostly. Now, there's a couple of them in there that are destroyed when the stuff's smoked or heated. So, as medicine advances out of the Stone Age for a change, it starts realizing that the propagation of stem cells increases when you use certain derivatives or teas made of certain portions of marijuana, and that those stem cells, and this is a real neat one, are transported by your system to wherever they need to go in order to assist with what's going on, whether it's repairs, fighting off a disease, negating cancer, or whatever. When people start understanding that there are benefits, then you're going to find that a lot of people are going to end up with either a derivative, and it could be like salt on a burger. It could be as simple as that. Something, take one small marijuana leaf, run it through a coffee grinder so that it gets really fine, sprinkle it on a salad. You're not going to get stoned off that one leaf, not when you ingest it. But the medical benefits are totally awesome. And we are slowly, as I said, you got to get out of the cave first. we're beginning to see the light at the end of the cave. When we walk out in the sunlight for the first time and realize that the Creator knew what He was doing with the herb of the field to cure your infirmities and whatnot, then maybe we'll start getting where we need to go. Okay?
Yes. Question for Tath. Replicators and farms. What happens when we get replicators? What will happen with farms?
Yes, I asked for this question to be asked because it was. Yep. I heard it discussed on a previous show, and I wanted to add to it. I'm a former farmer. I grew up on a farm. We had a cattle farm. We also grew wheat. Yeah, I know. Canola. Yeah, I know. And, other things. Lots of vegetables and fruits, which were really good. I'd like to reassure those who enjoy farming that there is still a need for farms in the age of replicators, because as Drake has mentioned before, there are a lot of things that don't replicate well. Anything alive, such as a living seed fruit, like a mango or mangosteen, they don't replicate very well. If you replicate them, you got to eat them real quick because they start to taste awful really quick. Wine, beer, anything fermented, an alcoholic beverage, now they don't have the same intoxicating effects in other dimensions as they do down here, but they are well appreciated. It's not for nothing that many of our legends dictate that we got the secret of beer or the secret of winemaking from the gods, because, these are great things and everybody uses them. Those don't replicate very well, and there is a vigorous trade in any kind of fermented beverage that you can imagine in outer space. Cheese, yogurt, kefir, and other bacterially produced food does not replicate well. Again, you can replicate it, but you better eat it really darn quick, because otherwise it's going to taste wacky as heck. There's other things that we don't replicate well, or even if you replicate it, you might prefer to use the natural thing. People still live in harmony with animals in places where replicators exist. People will still work with animals that shed hair that can be spun into yarn, and then use that yarn or thread to weave or knit something beautiful, or something beautiful and something functional. So, our alpacas will still be around, our sheep will still be around, cows will still be around, giving us excess milk when their calves have had what they needed. Things like that. There'll still be a reason to have plants and animals and take care of them and work with them. What will no longer be necessary, and what we can bid a very, very cheerful good riddance to, is the factory farming system, which not only poisons us at all, but is horrifically damaging to the animals, to the earth, and to us when we eat them. If you want to have a real eye-opener, watch Food Inc. It's on Netflix. You may be able to get it through other means as well. It's a real eye-opener. Now, people who choose to be vegetarian are often doing so because of the horrors of the factory farm system. The factory farm system is just as horrific for plant food as it is for animal food. What is the most humane thing to do is to grow small plot gardens and multicultured instead of monocultured seeds. So instead of just growing a field of wheat, you might have corn, beans, and squash growing together in the same little plot where they each help each other out and thus improve everybody's yield, each of them taking a level of the available sunlight so that it's spread equally and everything gets what it needs. They're happier, they're more resistant to disease, they produce more. It's just a little less convenient for us to harvest. This planet, even without replicators, is capable of producing healthy food for every human being on this planet without requiring the atrocities of the factory farm system. We've been tricked into thinking that this is the only way to feed people. It's not. Now, replicators will be extremely useful. They'll be able to give you finished meals at the press of a button. They'll be able to give you raw ingredients if you want to cook. They will taste good. They will be of very good quality, very good taste, and they'll be healthy. But there's something that living food, a fresh ripe tomato from your own vine, a block of cheese, a bottle of beer, there's this little extra bundle of energy that comes with living food. The East Indians call this prana, but that comes with a gift of a living food, and it's a little bonus that you get when you eat something that hasn't been replicated. Things that have been replicated are perfectly nutritious. They'll sustain you. You can live off them indefinitely. But there's something about living food that makes people a little bit more happy.
All right, thanks for that, Tom. Let's see, what time is it? 10 minutes. It's okay. Drake, is it possible that now the US dollar Federal Reserve notes is actually backed by the GDP of the secret space program? Just like what Catherine Austin Fitts speculated in her recent interview, UFO Economy. Is this the reason why gold and silver price is relatively low, because the GDP of the UFO economy has more value?
Let's put it this way. When you use a credit card, you get a receipt. Basically, an FRN is a receipt, and it is a debit, not a credit. It is a symbol of credit being exercised as currency. It don't fit any of the above. So, basically what you got is a valued wallpaper product in your pocket. Everybody needs to get that through their head. It is not a United States usable currency. It is an international reserve currency. We need our own dollar in order to make things right. When we do that, it will not be tied to, as such, GDP. Reason being is that the origin of currencies comes from the collateral accounts through certificates issued according to agreements made. Big difference between what everybody thinks and what everybody would like to have happen. In other words, you can never go off the gold standard, no matter how many people would like for you to. The gold standard was simply a manner in which to suppress the price of the gold as well as the usability of the dollar. In short, you notice that there ain't any silver certificates or gold certificates anymore. Reason being is they ain't got the metals to back it up. What you're dealing with is not as such a currency. It is not legal tender according to the Constitution. So you open a big can of worms and all this, you will have paper money for a while yet. The new paper money will say American dollar. Big difference, okay?
So basically, once we get the reset, there's a new dollar waiting in the wings after the economic collapse. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's not really an economic collapse. What it is a removal of the control capability of the central banking system. Rothschilds all the way across over to here. The people that are oligarchs and supposedly in charge and own everything ain't going to have nothing but a handful of paper that it probably will amount to a very expensive butt wipe.
Right. Drake, are the plans for the QEG energy device valid, functional, and do you think it's worth building this, or is it fraud material, disinfo?
You can get one to work. You got to tweak it a bit. You can do it if you want. I personally like the one that uses an attachment in hyperdimensional physics through varying means to the what is known as dark energy. I find those a lot more productive for two reasons. Basically, you don't ever have any shortage of the energy because all matter has a bit of that available and usually an excess. then to go along with it, the tapping type of device that I use doesn't have any moving parts of any kind. So, I got some other things to do yet here, getting my place in order. As soon as that's done, the workshop goes in, and I will probably be spending a lot of time in my workshop putting a couple of things together. First thing I'm going to do is put one together for me, so I can go off the grid, flip the breaker, and give the power company the finger. Every time we have an electrical storm or somebody up in Pittsburgh farts real hard, the power goes out, and God knows how long it's going to take them to turn it back on. Sometimes I think they don't want you to listen to certain shows on satellite, and they turn the power off so you can't hear what's said. So, there's a variety of things goes into this. It's like anything else. The only reason you have a power grid system than the system we have right now is money. That's the only reason. So you got to get that through your head. If there's no way that they can control, license, continually charge you for the convenience of, then they don't want it around. That's why Tesla got put in the wood pile real quick. This is why the water car didn't go anywhere. This is why you have problems with the plasma conversion systems that should be on every coal-fired plant. I mean, it basically takes all of the energies, to include any exhaust, and turns it into plasma. And plasma, look up plasma, see what it is. It's a combination of atomic and electrical energy that is relatively easy to work with if you follow certain parameters. It's different than electricity, but it's similar. Once you convert a coal-fired plant to plasma, you can tear the smokestack down. You don't need it anymore because there is no residue, none. This converts all of everything that is produced directly into energy. And, you can look up multi-directional impact drives. NASA used to have a lot of information on that. There are several other places you can find that, but that's an example of what a plasma system could be and can be used. Okay?
Right, thanks for that, Drake. Do you want to say your final words? Unfortunately, the show's at an end. That went very quickly, those 3 hours.
Yeah, get her done.
Tanaath, my dear, thank you so much.
I gotta concur with Drake.
Thank you so much
done.
for
I gotta
coming
definitely concur.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
And it's been a long time coming, and hopefully it won't be as long next time. Please come on again.
We'll see about that, all right? I still am not comfortable with doing shows when I really don't have much that I can point to in the quote-unquote real world that people can actually experience themselves.
Well, I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed that, and judging by the members, they also did. So thank you very much, Tanaath, and thanks to Drake. My name is Thomas Williams. We'll be back next Thursday. Bye for now.